Hello, Dr. Croston. My name is Chris Fagala. The following video presentation is a piece from my paper titled Torture. There are many kinds of torture being done all over the world that many of us wouldn't even think is torture. Starvation, lack of clean water, growing up an Iowa Hawkeye fan, and having a horrible work environment. But these forms of torture are not in the news. Even with the numerous laws all over the globe that state torture is not to be done, these laws are still being ignored and torture is being done anyway. For this reason, I believe something needs to be done so no laws are broken. Most notably, ISIS is doing whatever it can to get the attention by beheading journalists, murdering children, and burning people alive. These acts are angering the world, and the world is saying an eye for an eye. I disagree with what the majority is saying. An eye for an eye would make the whole world blind. I believe the one thing that needs to be done is governments need to start owning up for their illegal activities so that we can actually punish those that commit these atrocious acts to the fullest extent of the law instead of just letting it go. Torture is illegal without exception. In 1994, the United States signed the United Nations Convention Against Torture, which binds our country to the following stipulation: no exceptional circumstances whatsoever, whether the state of war or a threat of war, internal political instability, or any other public emergency, may be invoked as a justification of torture. Torture runs contrary to the teachings of all religions and dishonors all faiths. It is an egregious violation of the dignity and worth of every human being, both the torturer and the tortured. The Golden Rule makes it clear torture should not be perpetrated on others because would not want others to torture us. I don't think that's just my opinion. That's the opinion of many who's examined the topic, and that's why I put an end to these practices, Obama said, noting that he is absolutely convinced it was the right thing to do by ending torture. He said the U.S. could obtain information in ways that were consistent with the values of the country. By preventing these kinds of enhanced interrogation techniques, Obama said, the United States could make itself stronger and safer over the long term, because the step would take away a critical tool that Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations have used to recruit supporters. This is a decision that Obama is very comfortable with, and he thinks that the American people over time will recognize that it is better for us to stick to who we are, even when we're taking on an unscrupulous enemy. Torture can, of course, be domesticated in various ways. For example, the European legal system that used torture to obtain confessions in criminal cases set conditions for how much torture and what kinds of torture can be used. Torture could be used to investigate only relatively serious crimes. Even then, a serious amount of evidence implicating a prisoner was required before any torture could be used. More evidence was required for the more painful or debilitating tortures. The worst tortures were reserved for the most serious crimes, when the evidence was almost enough to convict even without a confession. Judges might be present both to put questions and to make sure the torturers do not overstep their legal limits. Even if domesticated in this way, torture still makes enough advantage of the prisoner's helplessness to seem morally objectionable in a way that ordinary punishment does not. People are disfigured due to bullet wounds and hellfire missiles, as opposed to immediately getting killed every day. Who is to say that getting an arm or a leg ripped off isn't suffering from an enormous amount of pain associated with it? As of now, people are saying those enhanced interrogation techniques are not so bad after all, even if it saves one life. What is the difference between people suffering from a bullet wound or shrapnel on the battlefield compared to a person being waterboarded or keeping a person standing for long periods of time? Suffering is suffering, but there are many kinds of suffering, but current laws state one is more humane than the other. This needs to change now. Policymakers should be waterboarded so they get the idea that new interrogation techniques, judgments made in a state of pain are more fully informed and hence more valid than those made in the absence of pain. J. A. Bybee, judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, had a lack of near-death experiences that explains his memo from 2002, which concluded that pain amounting to torture must be equivalent in intensity to the pain accompanying serious physical injury, such as organ failure, impairment of body function, or death. As with Mr. Bybee, our inability to appreciate the pain caused by certain techniques means we are more likely to authorize acts that we probably consider torture if they were ever performed on us. John McCain actually knows what torture feels like. Ultimately, this is about morality. What is at stake here is the very idea of America. The America whose values have inspired the world, have instilled in the hearts of its citizens that no matter how hard we fight, no matter how dangerous our adversary, in the course of vanquishing our enemies, we do not compromise our deepest values, he said. We are America, and we hold ourselves to a higher standard. That is what really that is what is really at stake. McCain did reject the idea of prosecuting any U.S. officials for using interrogation techniques in the past. No one else in the Senate could have given this speech, said Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. He speaks with personal knowledge. He still remembers the darkest nights when he tried to rest, when he was tortured brutally. Senator Dick Durbin said McCain's opinions may not be the popular view, but they are the right ones. We have a moral responsibility to safeguard the lives of innocent civilians by maintaining national security, and we have an obligation not to reduce fellow human beings to non-human status, even if we would describe what they have done as inhumane. When a person is tortured, they may not know that they are owed for their mistreatment, and it's up to the government to own up for their mistakes and give back for what they did wrong, through restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, and to make sure the tortured person feels satisfied enough to live on with their life as if it didn't happen. International human rights treaties and instruments provide that victims of international crimes have the right to seek and obtain effective remedies for the violation of their rights. The basic principles and guidelines on the right to a remedy and reparation provide that the term victim includes those that have individually or collectively suffered harm, and may include the immediate family or dependents of their direct victim and persons who have suffered harm and intervening to assist victims in distress or to prevent victimization. Until recently, in criminal proceedings, the standing of victims to seek reparation was limited to the domestic sphere. However, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court now recognizes that victims of crimes under the jurisdiction of the court may seek reparation and allows the court to make orders directly against the convicted person to make reparations to them. Words from an actual torture survivor proves very little is being done to eradicate this atrocious act. We torture survivors who have chosen to follow the path of reparation face many obstacles. From the beginning, our families, friends, doctors, lawyers, and politicians encouraged us to let bygones be bygones and get on with our lives. Many tortured victims only want to do this. We listened, but they did not hear us. Some of our accounts were too horrifying for most of them to believe, nor could they fully empathize with the perspective that we had only just established, that we must overcome the rapture, the feeling of victimization, to survive. All of us have confronted and learnt to live with the acts of torture, the meaning of our ordeals, and what we want to fulfill. We were determined to take action to survive. For many of us, the goal, as a matter of honor, it is for the states to admit that we had been tortured. We would like to see the torturers brought to book, brought to jail. We need to prove that they did not succeed in destroying us as human beings. And we need the financial compensation so that we can reclaim our lives again, become contributing members of society.